Today's video is presented by Notes and Clips. Head to notesandclips.com and use the code BADOWER25 to get the largest current site-wide discount. G'day everybody and welcome to the panel. My name is Jason Badara. I'm a comic book artist and writer, Joker, Harley, Criminal Sanity, and Artemis. And a bunch of stuff upcoming too, which I'm really excited about, especially Volume 2 of Joker, Harley, Criminal Sanity. I am joined today by Scott Stuart, is one of my best friends and lives and breathes Marvel Comics. You have every single issue of the Avengers, and apparently you're crawling onto the final stretch of an entire run of Iron Man.
I'm pretty close. I can go on eBay at any time and throw in a search, but it's got to be the right opportunity.
The hunt is half of it.
You don't find terribly many FF annual ones in Shepherd and Garage sales these days.
For those of you who don't know, Scott is out in rural Australia, so he's forced to wander the wasteland, Mad Max style, looking for his comic books. It is a tough deal, shooting down biker gangs and vagrants and all sorts of people who want water, but Scott wants comic books. That's pretty much Scott's life these days. But we are gathered here today to talk about Loki, the god of mischief, burdened with glorious purpose. We're going to start spoiler-free, and I'm trying to imagine the sort of person that has not watched the Loki TV show, but might watch it. I'm thinking maybe the sort of person that saw the Avengers, followed it all the way through to Endgame, but perhaps didn't have a great experience or did not like the first few TV show outings, and so was maybe checked out along the way. And I'm thinking maybe this person might want to come back and be like, what is this show about? What's going on? What do you think, Scott? Who else might not have seen Loki?
Alcoholics, the unemployable, angry loners. It's an interesting question.
See, I would have said all those people would actually watch Loki, like at his target.
It's an interesting question. Like the addressable market here. Would you just go in, having never seen single Marvel property, and start with Loki?
I was actually going to end the show with, but I think Loki is absolutely brilliant. But one of the most different things that Marvel has put out, She-Hulk also is totally different. But the comedy in Loki is completely unlike anything else in the MCU. I would almost go so far, even though I believe that Michael Waldron, the lead writer, I think is American, this show feels so absurdist British to me. There is no bathos in it. People are being snide. It's all just witty comments after witty comments. And I also feel that Loki very much is playing the fool. And when I say the fool, in capital letters, capital T, capital F, as a role that he's inhabiting, which is very different from the rest of the MCU. After watching Loki, I think you'd have a very tonally different time. But as a breath of fresh air, I think it's wonderful.
There's definitely a British influence. If I was to compare Loki to other shows, one of the touchstones I would hit is The Prisoner. Because of the production design, he's a literal prisoner. It's not clear who's in charge. There's a lot of lines I can draw there, and The Prisoner is quintessentially a British show. Yeah, it's definitely influenced there. The director of all 7 episodes, Kate Herron, is English, I believe.
She is, and she is absolutely one of the highlights of the show. I'll also say, I think that another main touch point is another British TV show. And I would say Doctor Who is a huge influence on this series of Loki. I almost feel that in some ways, Loki is playing the companion in this TV show. But you are jumping from reality in such a way that is very reminiscent of Doctor Who. So if you've checked out the MCU, but you're a fan of The Prisoner or of Doctor Who, I think you would enjoy Loki.
It's a real genre mashup because you're right, there's this Doctor Who thing about the time and space aspect to it. But there's also like a police procedural to it as well, as Loki and Mobius are unraveling the mystery and doing their research and buddy cop ethics. It's a melange of a show with a lot of disparate influences.
A similar piece of media that to the structure of Loki is a lot of Rian Johnson's recent work, where it starts out as one thing and then transitions and lets you in on the joke and then becomes something else. While it it is that police procedural for the first few episodes. It does do a sort of a turn in the same way. So if you like the structure of Rian Johnson's work, of Glass Onion, of Knives Out, where you think you know where it's going and then it suddenly turns itself narratively on its head, I think Loki absolutely falls into a similar structural vein there with the same wit, the same quality of writing too.
Perhaps just not with that one twist moment, more like slowly twisting throughout the run of the series. It's a marvelous piece of writing, a beautifully produced show. It's mostly gorgeous to look at in every frame. And that's all down to practical production and costumes and so forth.
The production behind it is absolutely incredible. The first time I watched Loki, I didn't have a great time with it. The second time I watched it for the stream, I still struggle with it. But this third time, I think I've come around to it. I've really figured out in the way that, honestly, I think She-Hulk really paved the path for me to enjoy this, that the MCU can have different tones. And I was really struggling with the way that they depicted Loki, but now I'm a lot more comfortable with it because I realized that it was more consistent through tone than it was trying to extrapolate Loki from all his previous stuff. But to do so, I went back and watched everything that Loki's been in. I started with Thor, obviously, worked into the Avengers, and then I took the giant hit of watching Thor, The Dark World on Scott. Scott, why do you have a Thor, The Dark World cap of all things?
It was given to me. I work in cinema. I happened to be in one when they got the marketing package and they, oh, you like that? And I think it's funny to have a Thor, The Dark World.
I think it's funny too. It's absolutely spectacular piece of merchandise to own. I apologize to everyone involved in that movie, but I think I've watched that thing for the last. I'm done. Absolutely done. I don't think Thor the Dark World is bad. I just don't think it's great. And I just don't think it's worth that much of my life. It's just, what have I done? 3 viewings of a movie that's solidly mediocre? It's not bad, right? It's just, there's just not enough there for me to enjoy, to justify giving that movie any more of my precious, limited, finite life. I always believed that when you look at the great pantheons of superheroes, when you look at Spider-Man, the X-Men, Batman, they all have the best villains. And I think if you want to elevate any sort of superhero media, you got to have a great villain. And one of the things that I think the MCU has done more often than not, at a level of success that I think is also unprecedented, is they have a whole bunch of great villains. Obviously, everyone puts Thanos at the top. But I want to set it up for anybody else that has watched any of the other movies. There's been like, yeah, but why Loki? So let's work our way up the pantheon of some of the ones that you really enjoy.
I think Obadiah Stane is great. Jeff Bridges is a very compelling actor, and he played that real menace.
I really get what he's doing. You have this guy who makes a play for the company and he wants to take out the little boy CEO so he can be the single owner of the company. Tries to have him assassinated and then voting Tony off the board and doing all those sorts of like little machinations and then stealing the suit. Like it all just feeds into a level of greed and aspiration for power that I thought was really believable.
I agree. And yeah, again, top flight performance. And there gets murky. I rate Thanos. I don't think he's a great villain because he's like a genius of murder, and which is how he's presented in the comics these days. As an artist whose canvas is your intestines. His logic in the MCU is childish and obviously flawed. So I rank him a little lower than probably a lot of people would, despite an absolutely brilliant performance by
Josh Brolin.
Josh Brolin.
I think Thanos is actually down the bottom of the MCU list in terms of character construct in his case. I get it, but I don't think it's very strong. And I think, again, to your point, for a character that smart and that old, to come up with that plan just seems absolutely ridiculous. But then we can separate that philosophy from the situations that he creates. That when you have a being that powerful, that is so off the rails and doing something that's so irrational and cannot be stopped. Like, even with one Infinity Stone, he punches the Hulk into utter submission. You have a character that created so many just fantastic situations for all the characters. But I still think that his ideology is, to your point, absolutely
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
It's very shaky.
Sort of thing you think sounds smart as an angry teenager before you know anything. And you don't interrogate your conclusion terribly deeply. It's not something a committed Pellet could really believe. At least for me.
One of my favorites has got to be Killmonger from Black Panther. I really felt that his philosophy was absolutely believable in a way that challenged T'Challa, that changed T'Challa, that it became more a fight against Killmonger's methods rather than his actual philosophy. Because I still feel like T'Challa actually took on what Killmonger was trying to do by the end of the film. So that is just absolutely massive for a supervillain to do that.
Loki is my number one. Killmonger has got to be one because he was bloody compelling and amazing, and he absolutely understood where he was coming from. And his villainy was the extremes he would go to for his goals. And the selfishness of putting yourself on the throne, compelling, believable, intense, a perfect foil for the hero, just from a mechanical point of view. Loki, Killmonger, everybody else.
There are a couple that I think are a little closer to the top for me. And I'm talking purely about the believability of their motivations. For me, I really think Tom Holland's Spider-Man has had some great villains. I really love the Vulture. Just this working class guy who's trying to do the right thing. He like mortgages everything, borrows money up to the hilt to do this massive contract that will change his life to provide for his family. And I get the impression that he's really just motivated to support his family.
He's a down on his luck construction worker who gets stood on by Stark Industries and Damage Control. But very quickly, his villainy develops. His fortune didn't come from stealing weird tech. His fortune came from repurposing it and selling it to other people to use in murders and crimes and terrorisms. The real important point, leaving aside the useless moral judgments, story-wise, he's amazing. Performance-wise, he's compelling. Motivation-wise, totally believable.
And I also think that Mysterio, too, Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is absolutely understood that malign genius. I get that. When you are good and then someone just steps all over everything that you've done and almost makes fun of it, that level of embarrassment, that level of anger and frustration is very palpable. And you can really see how a character like Tony Stark would rub all those people the wrong way. You don't get to the top without breaking eggs. What's the saying?
Make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Yes.
Can't get to the top without standing on a few toes. Yeah, but look, absolutely Mysterio's good. Look, it's a deep list.
Yeah.
It really is.
It really
There's been
is.
some good villains. We're not going to talk about Malekith from Thor the Dark World, but we're not going to get into whatever the name of the Walter Goggins character from Man and the Wasp is. For the most part, we got memorable villains.
Zemo, the Red Skull, Hela, Ego, Gore, even, I understand. Like, it's just all of them. I think they're just all great villains. And as to your point, I really think that Loki is absolutely the top of the pile. The entire phase 1 is defined by Loki. He is the end point of that entire incredible arc of movies. And he's established in Thor 1. This originally started as a Thor string. And I go back and I watched that first Thor movie, and I still think it is absolutely fantastic. Loki is the most interesting character on the screen at any time, that I believe his art, his journey, as well as believing Thor's journey, as well as it's setting up so many characters like Selvig and Darcy that turn up later in completely different IP, is a testament to just how great that movie is.
Testament to just how great Sarah Haley Fieber is and how she casts these characters. This is the secret sauce of the MCU. Unbelievable, in-point perfect casting.
Yeah, Sarah Haley Finn is just absolutely genius. I don't know where she finds these people, how she finds these people, because that's the other genius of Thor. At the time, both Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth were nobody. Nobody knew who they were. They'd done absolutely nothing. And to suddenly lean them up against Robert Downey Jr. and the epic that Iron Man had already become, they hadn't recast Edward Norton yet, so I can only presume that he was still a character on the table. To lean what is one of the biggest pillars of the potential Avengers on two unknowns is absolutely shocking. And both Hemsworth and Hiddleston have proven that they can not only carry that weight, but actually carry it forward, unlike a lot of people. And I really feel that they've both proven themselves to be massive stars. And most importantly for Hiddleston in this case, is that even while I found the depiction of Loki very tonally different to what we've seen in Thor, Thor 2, and Avengers, Hiddleston just still absolutely smashes it out of the park in such a way that he brings a level of charisma to the character that you can almost forget that he has attempted genocide twice. Hiddleston makes him so charming and likable. That is a goddamn superpower. The other pleasure of going back and watching Thor is that now seeing the storytelling entity that Hiddleston and the rest of the MCU created in Loki, you can go back and watch that first Thor movie, and every scene with Loki in it is so much deeper and richer, even though they did not know what was coming afterwards. It was so interesting watching Thor from Loki's perspective. And I really recommend going back and do it because you can see him actively reacting to everything that comes his way. When he goads Thor and the Warriors 3 and Sif into going to Jotunheim, I genuinely don't believe that he wanted the fight to break out. That would be an escalation too far out of his comfort zone, the way he'd seen things going. Already he's won. He doesn't need for there to be a massive fight. And he literally parlays peace. It's only when the king said, "Run back home, little princess," and Loki's like, "Oh dear." I really bring all of Loki's motivation back down to daddy issues. And there's one scene where you see them as children, and Odin is walking along with Thor on one side and Loki on the left side again. And he says,
"Only one of you can ascend to the throne. Both of you were born to be kings."
On one level, it makes sense that the oldest child will ascend to the throne, but there's also a subtle implication to it that either of you could become king. Just really lay all of everything Loki does at Odin's.
It's all Odin's fault. He's a manipulative, self-aggrandizing, bold bastard. He was really softened in the MCU, particularly post-Avengers. He became a kindly old man. He's just as genocidal as Loki, just he didn't let his kids see it.
When you find out later that he banished one of his children because she was too good at doing what he wanted her to do, and then imprisons Loki also. There's a line in Thor, The Dark World, when his mother comes to talk to him in the cell. And she's, "Don't you regret everything you've done? All these lives that you've taken here?" And he said,
"A mere handful compared to the number that Odin has taken himself."
Because you know that to sit on a throne like that, to create an empire, you're sitting on a throne of blood.
You sit on a throne of lies.
I really like that scene in Ragnarok where she marches through the throne world and it destroys the artifice of the story Odin tells now and reveals the truth underneath. Why would you have a mosaic of your crimes? But if you can get past that little logic flaw, it's like having under your wallpaper a signed confession for the murders you've committed.
So I think it was a celebration of a time. The Nazis literally had skulls on their caps. And I think at one point in Odin's history, he was quite proud and celebrating and motivating Asgard to be bloodthirsty and a conquest nation. You really see that Odin has absolutely messed this poor guy up. He's pretty much set him up with the expectation that he could be king. I think by the start of Thor, he's given up and he realized that Thor is going to be king and he's trying to delay it and just be a little spanner in the works. But when Thor is exiled and then Odin falls into the Odin sleep and he gets to step onto the throne, I think when he finally tastes what he feels that he is owed, and there's again a great line from Thor: The Dark World where he says,
"Satisfaction's not in my nature."
And he starts hanging on to that. And that's really, to me, we talk about the point that villains go over the line. And that is where he starts going over the line, where he goes to Thor and he says, "Mother doesn't want to see you again. The treaty with the Frost Giants is conditional that you stay here." And Thor's, "Okay, I'm sorry." And then he tells the Warriors 3 that I cannot undo my father's last command and bring Thor back. And it's only when people absolutely start disobeying him to bring Thor back that he goes full scorched on everybody. And one of the things that he does, and again, that I alluded to, is that Loki has attempted to commit genocide twice. Once with the Frost Giants, he turns the Bifrost on Jotunheim and plans to blow it up. And the second time with the Battle of New York. Scott, bringing it back, I'm going to see how badly your beers have affected you. What is the common thread between Babylon 5 and the movie Thor?
Joe Straczynski is in Thor.
You're just too good. You're too good.
He was very associated with the character. He's one of the hillbillies trying to pick up the door at the tailgate hammer party. Stan Lee.
He's the first hillbilly that discovers the hammer. He's the guy that drives up to the creator and wanders down and tries to pull the hammer for the first time and then starts the trailer party around the hammer, which I got to say is the most American thing that I've ever seen in my life. Like, having lived here now for 10 years, I'm like, yes, that's absolutely what would happen if we found alien life in the middle of the desert.
I think that Australians would turn up with eskies and a barbecue too. But the whole tailgate thing is very American. I'm surprised we haven't stolen it because it suits the Australian ethos very well.
It really does, actually, to just have a party out of people's cars while you wait for some massive event to happen feels very Australian. I'm pitching this to the person that has watched the Avengers, has watched Thor, and for some reason has not watched Loki. Going through all of Loki's earlier work is how consistent the TV show is with the themes that Loki puts forward all the time. One of the things that Loki always talks about is the idea of freedom.
Freedom is life's great lie.
The unspoken truth of humanity is that
You crave subjugation. The bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy.
And what's really interesting about Loki is that it extrapolates that idea. To say, Loki, if you were to actually be ruled in the way that you want to rule, then what? And it is really fun in the way that it confronts this sort of Orwellian nightmare through the eyes of this character. For those of you who don't have the patience to watch or read 1984, you could perhaps check out Equilibrium instead. It's 1984 with gunfights.
At this point in the YouTube video, you've got to insert the clip of Thor from Ragnarok going, "Is he though?"
Note to the editor. Sure, I got you. I'll do that.
Look, I see where you're going, and I love Equilibrium, sir. It like touches on some of the same things. Although, gun to my head, reread 1984 or rewatch Equilibrium, I'm probably choosing Equilibrium, don't get me wrong.
Loki is an absolute ton of fun. And watching him oscillate almost through the 5 stages of grief as he comes to terms with being in this situation is really fun. And again, I can't stress enough how it very much leans into the absurdist, and Loki is very much, I know a lot of people took issue with Loki being the butt of the jokes, but on the other hand, we are talking about a guy that's killed over 1,000 people, so not a good dude.
I remember the stream where we make each other the butt of jokes all day, every day.
It really is something that we do as Australians after they have the misunderstanding in the forest and Thor hits Cap with the hammer and they go to the helicarrier and they're talking. And one of the things that he says, do not speak of him like that. He's my brother. And Widow says he just killed 80 people in 2 days and he's adopted. Then he goes on to kill Coulson and then drops his brother out of the Hulk container, attempting to murder him. And then goes on to, and I had to do some Googling for this, apparently someone came up with the number of 1,019 people died in the Battle of New York. I don't know how, but that's the general consensus. Most people think it's a lot more. And then the number of frost giants that he killed. Loki, if he considers you a lesser being, you have 2 options. That is either to worship him or die. One of the things I want to come back to, which you mentioned earlier, Scott, is Kate Herron, the director. I think she is the absolute star of this show. Her and Hiddleston. Like, there's a list. I want to break them all down, but I think the music is amazing. I think Autumn DeWilde, the DOP, the director of photography, is amazing. The entire production department is absolutely off the chart. This is just an amazing looking show.
You're absolutely correct. I'm really going to tip my hat to the writing team. How clever is that structurally? They've got to take a character from A to B. The audience knows A and knows B, but there's no shortcut there. So they build one and they make it narratively compelling and propulsive and emotionally true. They brainwashed 2012 Loki and rebuilt him as 2021 Loki, who is a completely different character by this point. I absolute awe of the economy of character work. Michael Waldron is credited writer for episode 1, but it was obviously he method all the way through the series because it's so cohesive. How could it not? Narratively, one of the most deliberate hours of television you might ever see.
It is an episode that has grown on me more and more as I watched. I really wrangled with it initially, but I have come around to enjoying what they did there. I would also up it one further that I don't think that they created the 2021 Loki from Ragnarok. I think they created the public's perception of Loki in 2021. And that is that we loved this character. We wanted this character to be a protagonist, to be able to root for him in a way. And there is one of the interesting things at the end of Endgame, we got to see Thanos get what he wanted. The interesting thing about Loki is that the idea is posed to him. If you did get what you wanted, and then what? And he doesn't really have an answer, because for him, it's the struggle and the journey is really what that is. And when that is taken away from him, he's forced to really completely reinvent himself. And while I really rubbed up against some of it badly the first time, now watching it again, I really start to see that when Loki sees a power that is so far more massive than everything he's ever considered before, that he is really forced to just completely reckon with everything that he knows and believes. And I think that more than anything else that happens in the episode is, for me, what helped make me believe that he changes.
We were talking earlier, could somebody who's not seen anything else like at all in the MCU into Loki? And it's obviously difficult because the character comes with so much baggage. The creators rightly assumed the audience would bring to the character. But then they do bring you up to speed in case you only saw this bit or that bit. And through that process, they evolve the character from the plot starting point to the emotional starting point of their story. And it's a real understanding of bring an audience to a point you need them to be for your story to work. It's a staggering achievement in some ways.
It's interesting because it is such an analysis of the character's baggage and the character's history. And I wonder for those, like for myself on the first watch, that struggled to believe in that journey that they created in that first episode. I almost think that it would be easier if you hadn't seen any of the MCU stuff. You'd be like, oh, he's a bad guy and he's had a plan, and that plan is now basically spitting into the ocean. I think it's really interesting on a storytelling level. And the idea of turning Loki into the rebel instead of always trying to be the ruler. When you live under the idea of your own rulership, this is your role. And it's really interesting to do that. And Kate Herron the camera is so directed and alive. She knows when to let it sit for those over two shots and just let these beautiful sets or CGI backdrops just do create the energy for her, and let these amazing actors. I think Owen Wilson is absolutely incredible in the role. In some ways, I almost wish they didn't get an actor of Wilson's caliber, because I feel that Mobius is almost too clever for Loki. There are too many times when Loki is forced to look stupid, and I really struggle with that. When you see him being so good in things like Thor and even Thor 2, for all its faults, every scene with Loki in that movie is fantastic. And also the Avengers, the way he plays everybody. I would have liked someone a little bit more on Loki's level rather than someone who was so far above. I think they pushed Loki down to elevate Mobius.
They pushed Loki down to establish the TVA as so far beyond him and his understanding of how the universe works, which again was their sort of deliberate intent. None of Loki's gambits would have been stupid had they worked. He just constantly underestimated these people because he did not expect them to be as powerful as they were. There's a scene opening the drawer.
Let's just say that he sees something in the drawer that completely changes his scale of what power is.
The relationship with Mobius is the same thing. The drawer shows him that external power that he wields is not sufficient here. The relationship with Mobius shows him the mental power, the emotional power is not sufficient here. He is outclassed in every way. Like every good protagonist, it makes him a real underdog. Because all we're really doing here is pulling the most charismatic human that ever lived, putting him in front of a camera for 6 hours. And so how do we make that work? And how do we play to those strengths? And if you're going to turn him sympathetic, You literally have to have something that is a real threat to him. A real threat to a character we've already seen die by the universe-ending threat from the main core of the movie. He has to be completely outclassed.
I don't think he should be outclassed in the act of deception. I think Loki's lies should have been better and more convincing. Everything that's coming out of Tom Hiddleston's mouth, it is the most transparent lie. And Mobius calls him on him absolutely immediately, every time. And when you remove Loki's ability to lie to people, I think you really remove a fundamental part of the character.
If they depowered the character completely and deliberately, the collar depowers his magic. Owen Wilson seeing through his depowers his intelligence. The drawer full of pretty trinkets. Giggled at by a man of diminished intelligence. I get where you're coming from, but I don't know why it's not a good thing. All of these things you're raising are actually good things.
But I think they
wonder why the series really works.
Well, I think it works because it works in tone. And because it is playing Loki for laughs, and Hiddleston is absolutely playing Loki as the fool in every episode, and because he's charismatic, and because we want to love Loki the way that he's being depicted, we want him to be the underdog. And again, one of the things that I think that is so smart about both this and She-Hulk is that both the writing teams were so aware of what the audience wanted and felt, and in a really positive way with Loki and a really negative way with She-Hulk. And what I mean is that the audience has really positive feelings towards Loki and the audience has really negative feelings towards She-Hulk. And they both knew that going into it, what the reception would be.
I was just going to agree completely that there is this meta. The stage of the MCU we're in is completely colored by the fact that everybody knows all. And you can scan through Wikipedia if you ever need to know anything or are confused by a previously on. It's all there while the opening credits play, and then you're up to speed. And you've got to give credit for the creators to playing up to that and playing against it at times.
But I really like that. I think it's a commentary on fascism and fanaticism and about crisis of faiths and how people react when they're finally given evidence that contradicts something that they've always believed in, for Loki and for every other character that is in the show also, which to me feels a very British thing to do. Having British leads and a British director has given Loki a sense of making it feel like the most expensive episodes of Doctor Who that I've ever seen, and most beautiful episodes of Doctor Who I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I have watched every episode of Doctor Who, and not a single one looks anything like. The one thing I hate about the production design of Loki is it makes me feel so old. I remember when Archive was a thing. It had got these incredible reproduction Archive machines everywhere with the logo in the right way.
So much money was spent on this. Like, we're talking $150 million, which a lot of people might think, oh my God, of course it's going to look great. There's that much money thrown at it. Kate Herron had not had a win that big in the past. She never managed a production that big, let alone Loki, which felt like 6 one-hour-long movies. It is a scale of production that's 3 other Marvel movies, or perhaps almost one Endgame like that. It's absolutely epic, and I can't believe it. It's such a stunning achievement that what she did, being able to upscale on that level. I think Loki is consistently the best-looking show that Marvel has put out, hands down, and I think it's right up there across even the movies. I think maybe only the Guardians movies.
What actually lands and connects with you about Loki is that it feels like a real building. It's actual brickwork and paint and felt and velour and just the physicality of it. We still can't animate it properly. And the movies are doing themselves a disservice by doubling down on the animation part of it and not finding clever ways to build it practically.
I 100% agree. Just Kasra Farhani, the production is absolutely incredible. What he did is just unbelievable across every level, right down to the typeface choices, the every single detail. And it feels so real to me. If you've been one of those people that's been struggling with a lot of the recent Marvel movie stuff because it's all shot on a green screen, this feels so real. Before we get into spoilers, Scott, should we show people this absolutely magnificent cover that you found? Let me switch. Here we go. Gillen, McKelvey, classic team.
Marko Djurdjevic, absolutely great cover artist, especially through this period of Marvel. This is June 2010. Siege was the big Marvel event of the season, and it was built on Asgard, like basically living far above a town in Oklahoma. And a whole bunch of shenanigans falling out from that. I love this painting. It's one of my favorite representations of old school classic Loki, who by this point barely appeared in the comics, and I don't think has outside of a handful of appearances since this time. But this is the Loki we grew up with.
Classic Loki, the horns, the green, and credit where credit's due. The Avengers #1, the comic book. Who's the main villain in that, Scott?
Brigands, it's Loki.
So one of the other things that the MCU managed to also pull from the comic books is that Loki is the villain in the very first issue of the Avengers that managed to get everybody together. And the movie managed to replicate that also. One of the things that I point to is that this character has so much meat on his bones, more than enough gravitas and motivation and believability and means to pull the Avengers together for the first time. And it's the way that he plays them all, the Thanatos Gambit. For those who don't know, that's the idea that you intend to lose, to be captured, to destabilize the opposing forces from within, which is what he does. And it works perfectly. Again, very smart character. I would love to have seen more in the TV show, but on the other hand, it's still a ton of fun. You got another cover for us, Scott?
No, that was the only one I picked out. No, of course I got other comic covers. This is another favorite of mine for classic Loki. This is Thor 264. That is not Walt Simonson.
Walt Simonson also featured in the first Thor movie. He's sitting at the table, so there's another cool Easter egg.
Loki is a character who has evolved over time and presents in a number of different ways. This is a page from Thor Volume 3, number 5 from January 2008, illustrated by the impeccable Quapel, inked by Mark Morales, who just ubiquitous and super good inker. And it's the debut of female Loki. Talking about Olivia Quapel, that's the cover to this issue featuring Sif and big broad-faced Thor, which was a look at the time that Quapel promoted heavily.
I highly recommend his Instagram stream. Olivia Quapel is just ridiculous. Oh, is this Alan Davis?
This is Alan Davis. Of course it is. I think he's even inking himself rather than using Mark Farmer on this cover.
Wow.
This is Child Loki. Again, no spoiler reasons, one of the different presentations of Loki throughout the history.
What's interesting on this child cover too, for those who watch the movie, this is the original Hogan. This is what he looks like. He's not Asian in the comics. And this is the original Volstagg, who is a lot more voluminous, as you can see. This is Fandral, who pretty much looks exactly like he does. Sif is pretty close too, and that is Hela. And one of my favorite things about Ragnarok is that they got her goddamn giant spiky headdress going.
It was so magnificent. Al Ewing is my favorite guy working with Marvel at the moment. He is so clever, so experimental, and so informed about the history of Marvel. If you're into those deep stories, everything he does is great. And if you're not, then check out Immortal Hulk, because all you need to know about that is the Hulk exists. And other than that, it's, especially if you're horror, I love Al Ewing to death.
Yeah, I've read those first two Al Ewing graphic novels, and they are absolutely incredible. Can I guess? I think this is Jenny Frison. Thank you. I can still do it.
From April 2014, Loki was a teen heartthrob at this stage, affiliated with the Young Avengers, and establishing himself as a bit of a bisexual demigod. One of the most striking Lokis of all time. You have to give major props to this Trad Moore cover for Politician Loki. Very much by this stage, August 2016, totally overwhelmed by the Hiddleston performance.
Not only is this a great cover, but as I mentioned to you before, Scott, whoever came up with that Believe logo, the Belie, is just brilliant. You deserve a raise. I just think it's one of the greatest things to associate with Loki. Could you take us back to that old classic cover where we were debating who the artist was? Yes, there we go.
October 77, it could be an early Walt Simonson pencil. It's definitely Joe Sinnott inking.
I was about to say it feels Kirby-esque in its texture, but it's not in its structure, which makes me think that it's Sinnott inking over perhaps a very young Walt Simonson.
I am pretty diligent about this research, but I did this research months ago. But that is the Loki that we had for 40 years.
It is very much the classic Loki, and their casting of, again, we will not talk how or why, but of Richard E. Grant in the TV show is just amazing. And one of my absolute favorite things. If for some reason you're a fan of the old comics and you have not watched Loki, then I think you will just be in for an absolute treat. I got to meet Walt Simonson once when he came to Australia. I had a great experience with him. I was in line of a bunch of people who were all showing our folios to Walt Simonson. And the guy in front of me was very talented, but I could see that he had a bunch of things that he needed to work on. And it's not my place to call that out. He was much better than me at the time. So the guy gets to Walt and just waxes effusive about this guy's artwork. And he just walks off on a cloud beaming. And so I show Walt my work and Walt just starts glowing over my artwork. And I'm like, sir, I need help. If I want to hear that it's good, I can just show it to my mom. I need to know what I need to do to be sitting where you are. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, dead serious. I need to know what I have to work on. And he just gives me a look and he's like, all right. And he just gave me some of the best critiques that I needed at the time and really helped me. And I still remember that moment to this day. I appreciate his honesty. I appreciate his eye and his candor. And to this day, I'm still trying, like, my most energetic piece is still nothing compared to the weakest piece that he's ever done. He's just a master of momentum and energy and power.
The last thing I'm going to show you before we have to get into some level of spoilers is just this random cover because I love Simone Bianchi, and anytime I can bring up that dude's work, I'm gonna.
Simone Bianchi is another artist who I really recommend on Instagram. He's absolutely incredible to check out. So we're going to wrap up our spoiler-free version of Loki. If you've been with us and you're still not convinced to go see the show, then perhaps it's not for you. But if you do not care or you have seen the show, then we will engage in spoilers, start going through episodes, our favorite things. Scott has a whole bunch of covers to show us, which show the massive and wonderful history that they have pulled from the comics into the TV show. You'll probably notice that this piece is a little different now. As I started to color, I decided to change the composition here. I've moved Loki further away from us and changed his body so he's not as hunched. It's less dynamic, but I like the portrait feel. I'm going to try and bring some dynamism with the colors. While the rest of the video has been me drawing at normal speed, I'm sort of speeding this up a bit now so we can all be on the same page. Literally. This is the final artwork that I'm going to then paint. I think this is a fine likeness, but it's not finished. This is intended to be a plan for my painting. If you'd like to see me paint this, check out our next video where Scott and I will do a spoilers version of the Panel vs. Loki Season 1. If you'd like a copy of the finished piece, check out my Patreon. It will be one of the monthly offerings from my print paladin level onwards. Or you can find me at a convention and grab it from me in person. Check out jasonbadow.com for my con schedule. I also would love to gently remind you, if you're on YouTube, maybe there's something about this video you liked. Showing that with an actual like would just be an incredible help to us. But if you want to level it up and catch more of our chats and my video essays, you can hit that subscribe and notification bell. See you after this message from Notes and Clips. You might not know that I draw most of my art digitally, but when I draw something on an actual piece of paper, it brings so much more meaning to me. In an increasingly digital world, having something physical makes something so much more special. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to Notes and Clips. This is a line of absolutely gourmet stationery. It's all hand designed and developed by two ex-software and IT developers. They want to bring you back to doing things with your own hands with something really beautiful. I know how hard it is to buy great presents for people, but Notes and Clips is now your go-to for amazing prezzies. Look at these incredible stationery boxes. These are the perfect gifts, and they cover a range of interests and styles for anyone who only has to have an appreciation for beautiful design and construction. What about weddings? Is your partner-to-be doing all the work? Get them a stationery kit and the wedding planner bundle. After that, you'll be able to fly under the radar until you got to put your tux or your frock on. And if you know someone who's into stickers, Notes and Clips has you covered. I mean, technically they're stickers, but these are next level. They're hand printed, artisan designed. I'm gonna call them adhesive decorations. You could use them for planners, cards, put them in your kids' lunch boxes, or just anything you want to make look better or feel special. And that's the thing. Everything Notes and Clips has is the perfect gift. And when you gift them, either to yourself or to someone else, please use them. It's all beautiful. It's
art, but it's all designed to be used. And with worldwide shipping and tracking, you'll get your next set from the UK in 7 days to most locations. You can go to their site, notesandclips.com, and it'll even convert everything from pounds to whatever your currency is. And I think their price point is a steal for the quality. So either their Etsy store or their website, notesandclips.com, and if you use the code BADOWER25 at checkout, you'll get an even further 25% off. I don't know where you're going to find handcrafted stationery at this price. I've used so many digital tools, but there's no replacement for something real, something you could see on your desk or on your shelf. And when you go back to basics, you should do it with something beautiful. Thank you, Notes and Clips, for sponsoring today's video.
I live in a city of like 150,000 people. I'm not, making my way through the bush with a machete and a cork hat.
For those who don't know, in Australia, we'd have these wide-brimmed hats, and they would cut holes into them and tie string around those holes. So you'd have string all around your face. And at the bottom of the string, they would tie a cork to keep the flies out of your eyes, which sounds way more annoying than actually having a bloody fly buzzing in and out of your face.
But the other method is the fly veil, where you would untuck the back of your shirt so it would hang out, and you would smear